Alongside the Insiders, Darren, Dreger, Pierre, LeBrun, and Chris Johnston at the NHL General Managers Meetings in Palm Beach, Florida. Gentlemen, the meetings are now officially underway behind closed doors, and they're not all together at this very moment, Pierre.
Yeah, so they broke into smaller groups this morning to kick off the GM meetings. We see this every year, not necessarily always right at the start of the GM meetings, but the smaller groups tend to discuss different rule changes, different ideas to tweak the game. Doesn't often lead to actual rule changes, but it can, so we'll find out after the meetings where this leads. And the other thing I would point out is that the GM's executive committee, which has the likes of Kevin Cheveldayoff, Doug Armstrong, Steve Yzerman on it, they met with Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and Colin Campbell on Sunday here to sort of tee up the meetings.
When we look for items on the agenda, the fact that the playoffs are, well, getting pretty close, Dregs, a number of topics will come up in discussion, specifically dealing with postseason hockey.
Yeah, and probably more so in the breakout groups like Pierre just described. And you talk about hot button issues, scenarios that could unfold in the Stanley Cup playoffs, coaches' challenges, the criteria that they continue to employ. They'll revisit that. You know, does it still work? I don't think that we should expect any sort of drastic changes or alterations prior to the Stanley Cup playoffs, but they'll have those discussions. Goaltender interference is always a hot button issue, so they'll tangle with that one. Kicked in pucks, you know, is everybody on board? Are we okay with the standard and how that's applied? So they'll begin in the breakout sessions, and if there's something that requires a more expansive look, then they take that to the full room and the bigger meeting.
And speaking of hot button, hot as the Florida sun could be when George Parros makes a presentation on behalf of player safety. And that's because of kind of the context of where we're at, right? There's been a number of significant suspensions this season. You go right back to the start of the year. Rasmus Anderson appeals the suspension. Charlie McAvoy, the same. David Perron, his 6-game suspension in December. Morgan Riley here more recently. And this is expected to be, well, you know, George Parros would always speak at a meeting like this, a more expansive explanation from him, perhaps, for some of the things that have happened, you know, reinforcing where the standard is. And, you know, that could be hot button in the playoffs, too, if his department is called on to make a decision down the road. So we'll see, you know, where it goes if any GMs want any follow-ups with George.
You've heard from our insiders. Now it's time to hear from you. What do you think of what's been going on with the Department of Player Safety this year? And what do you think of the way the rules are right now going into the postseason? And we should also start to talk about long-term injured reserve. We'll discuss that later. It's time to hear from you.